Hi anyone! If you can hear me now, please leave a comment to tell me that things are sounding and looking okay. The usual go through and see if everything's up and running. It's a bit difficult to know sometimes if things are okay, but if you let me know in the comments, I'll be sure that things are. Hi Andrew, welcome to my live stream. That probably means that you can hear me, which is great. Also, I added the chat up on my actual screen, so everything is visible. Everything sounds fine, that's great. Let's see if someone else is going to join us in the start here. As you can see, I'm at the cabin with a new setup. Not to... Can you explain the reason of you trying to become a bookworm? Yes, Sean, I can. Thank you, Arne. Well, I've made several videos about this topic, my reasoning maybe for trying to become a bookworm, and I think it boils down to that I want to be the kind of person that reads. It's actually started out superficial, but now it's more I enjoy the actual reading. I'm very fond of stories, and I've watched a lot of movies over the years, and that seems easier, or it is easier, but I felt like I needed to try to move over to something that was a bit more like trying to get to take the time to read, not just put on a movie and that's great. So it's kind of a little bit with concentration, maybe trying to take a deep dive into being calm, I guess. Did that sound great? All right. I find it's more indulging to actually read. So when I'm first sit down to read and I get the hang of it, it's a much more enjoyable process, I find, or it's more for you than for... Okay, that I was going to rant a bit on a very high level that I'm not capable of, so yeah. I want to be a reader, I guess. I like people who read, but that's a generalization, so it's a difficult question. Andrew says, I find myself drawn to read a lot plays recently, partially because I do amateur dramatics. Do you ever read plays, and if so, how do you find the experience? Well, I recently read Hamlet, which was not my first ever play that I've read, but I found that immensely enjoyable and just much more fast-paced than I thought it would be, and a lot of fun, humorous characters. So actually I've brought with me one book to the cabin this weekend. In 2 seconds I'll go and get it. So this is what I brought, Per Gynt by Henrik Ibsen. So maybe Norway's most famous play ever, I guess. And I thought that would be an excellent way to read more fast-paced, not that big books. Because what struck me was that plays aren't that long often, so that was great. Also, most of the things that Jon Fosse writes is also kind of play-like. I guess he writes mostly plays and some books, and some plays becomes books, so you can say that I will probably read a lot of his books as well after a while. But yeah, it's a funny you should ask that right now, because I'm really been in the mood to read more plays. Welcome, and I'm sorry for this, but is Jungerstein like a proper pronunciation? Or should I call you Mr. J? I've thought about this since the last live stream, because it's kind of difficult to know, I guess. Welcome, Richie, to this cabin hall. Lumpis2 says, just wondering, have you gotten a better vocabulary in everyday life after reading a lot? I don't actually think so. I've thought about it, and some people say that it sounds like I have a bigger vocabulary now than I did before, but that's more towards doing this kind of thing on YouTube, where I'm forced to use a bigger part of my English speaking language, but I don't think I have a bigger language in Norwegian. Not at this point, I guess. It's not that often I have to stop and wonder what kind of words I'm looking at, but who knows? It might be a thing where you actually learn something without actually knowing that you've learned something, if that made sense. Not that long ago I watched one of my earlier videos on YouTube, and then I realized that something had happened, but it may have to do with me being more comfortable in front of the camera as well, I guess. But it's an actual excellent question, and it's one of those things where when I started doing YouTube and when I decided to read more books, I thought that this would be one of the things that I would improve on, I guess. Knowing more words. Yeah. So, let's see. I thought I'd speak about the books that have gotten into my shelf since last time I did a book haul. I was kind of tired of doing book hauls after a while, pretty much because I felt like I did them all the time, and I did buy a lot of books. I went to a lot of flea markets and found a lot of stuff. So I felt like I did kind of book hauls all the time. So that's the reason why I'm doing this in this type of thing instead. Feels maybe easier or more fun, I guess. So let's see. I just thought I'd mention some things that have to do with my Storygraph. Last live stream I talked about migrating from Goodreads to Storygraph, and still I find myself using both services because they have different functions. One thing I do is that I spend a lot of time on Goodreads if I want to find information about a book, but I like the graphics a lot more on Storygraph if I'm going to look at the books I have or I have read, and like finding out what kind of reader I am, because that's something I'm still struggling with. And so I thought I'd do this in February maybe, that I put all the books I haven't read into my Storygraph shelves, so I can after a while see that I have a goal of reading this and that many percentage, a higher percentage of my total books in my shelf. So that's a nice feature. Sean asks, have you read Murakami, and also if you prefer books to be a medium of information, entertainment, aren't you already a bookworm? Yes, I think I've said to myself at least that I am a bookworm already, but it's back and forth. Sometimes it's a struggle, and I know that many people think about being many people have read all their life, and they know that there will be ups and downs and think of that as a part of the process. But for my sake, since I'm that eager to try to keep my habit of reading up, feels like a very downfall when I can't remember to read or I'm not feeling like reading. That just seems sad. But you're right, I'm probably a bookworm. If it's my preferred medium is something I think about a lot. Now I'm also listening to a lot of audiobooks, since my reading goal for 2023 is 100 books. I can't go outside of the audiobooks. I need them to reach my goal. So there you have two types of goals, I guess. When it comes to Murakami, he was one of my favorite reads last year with what I talk about when I talk about running. That's a very, very entertaining book, and the writing is excellent. I actually brought with me Norwegian Wood to this cabin stay because I know a lot of people like that one, and I think Norwegian Wood seems to be the book that many people tend to go to for an easier read. I guess some of them might be too complicated, but yeah, that's my next, I think. Also, After Dark, if that's the right title, it's one of those... Is it After Dark? At least that's one of his shorter novels, but that one seemed to be a bit complex as well. I think it's Tokyo One Night described and can be a bit confusing. So Norwegian Wood, certainly not a basic love story, but a love story which is supposed to be good. It was in college, nickname coined by a couple of friends. The duration is pretty ridiculous, having to do with pro wrestling, not Kaljong. Okay, yeah. I don't know a lot about pro wrestling. I'm just struggling with... I don't know if the Scandinavian or Norwegian would be... We're accustomed to saying the last part of, since it's also a part of my name, but Jungastein, something like that. But if you don't mind me blurbing out whatever I... trying to say that name, it's fine. So, the first thing was Storygraph. I'll go through some of the books I brought with me. I brought with me a lot of books for this day. Some terms for readers I struggle to like get the hold of, like what kind of reader are you? And I'm basically a mood reader, I've realized, and I realized that whilst going to the cabin, because I brought 40 or 50 books with me, which I know that I struggle to like decide on which books to read at certain time. And it didn't strike me that some people might not have that issue at all. Some people have their times where they only read this and that type of book. It didn't occur to me that that was a thing at all. So basically I just pack for every mood possible and hope for the best, which seems to be working. But I just feel bad, and I know that I should have chosen my Kindle instead, because bringing 40 or 50 books to the cabin just seems silly. Very silly, I guess. So the first book I took with me is this, Such a Fun Age. And this is one of those novels that just came to me because of, I guess, TikTok and Instagram, YouTube, all those kinds of things. I have no idea what this book is about, because it's just a cover you see and think this will be an easy read or an like light-hearted read. Maybe that's prejudice. I don't know about you in the comments if you think that. So like I can look at some covers and think, well, you're going to be kind of complex and difficult to like know what's about. But this, I also don't know what this is about, of course, but I just guess that this is going to be easier. Also, like it has a bigger font, and that always makes me happy. So I have a bunch of these in my shelf, and sometimes I just go to my shelf. If I don't know what to read at all, I'll just pick one of these and think to myself, well, this is going to be a non-challenge. It might also end up being a 1-star, but very often it's a book I enjoy. So often I just enjoy a book because it's easily read. That's a bit superficial, but that's the way it is. Can I just ask, where are you guys calling in from today? Never asked that question. I know that many people ask that question, and it's interesting. I have so few viewers on my channel, so mostly it just says that everyone's either from Britain or from the US. And that might be true, I just don't know. I always judge a book by its cover. Yes, I believe we all do that. It's impossible not to have that, like the feeling you get from a book and like knowing what's the deal here, I guess. So the next one I found for free. So this year I have a goal of buying only 50% of the books I read, just to have read a bigger portion of my shelf space, which is like a good idea, I think. I always envy the people that have like a cart of TBR books and it's like 10 books that you want to read. And I haven't read a lot, but my TBR is probably around like 200-300 books at this point. And for each day that passes, I find a new book I could imagine reading. So this book is by Nick Cave, and I found it for free. And the reason I say that is because the free books doesn't count in my system. Because if you find a free book that you want to read, I couldn't bear like thinking that that shouldn't happen. But I decided I want to read more books from artists this year, and this is called The Death of Bunny Munro. Nick Cave is an artist I really enjoy, but this book doesn't seem to be great. That I found out after I found it. I went on Goodreads and, well, yeah, I just hope it's okay. At least this one also is short, so that's a great thing. Yeah, as I said earlier in this, superficial. So we have one from Norway, that's Arne. You I know. And then Northumberland, UK. Probably would have to look it up at the map. But I have like a picture of it in my head now, but I'm not going to try to tell you what I'm thinking about that place in my head, because that would end in catastrophe. Barat also couldn't have placed on the map. Sorry. And Glasgow, that I could probably find on the map. Okay, I should never have asked that question, but thank you all for answering. It's kind of embarrassing when I don't know where things or places are. Of course, I've been to the UK a number of times, in many places also. But I've been to Edinburgh and St Andrews, so not yet Glasgow. But I read Sugarbane last year, the year before, and that's placed in Glasgow. So I felt like I got to know that place a bit during that read, but it didn't seem like a pleasant place when I read Sugarbane, of course. It's kind of a dark novel. Yeah, let's go over to the next one I have, and that's Sally Rooney with Wonderful... What's the English title? Wonderful World, Where Are You? Hope it is, because that's the direct translation at least. I read Sally Rooney's Normal People, and I did enjoy that immensely. That was one of the first books I read when I made this YouTube channel. Also one of the first books I actually thought of when I thought of starting to read, because it is Beautiful World, Where Are You? Yep. And now I can't remember if that was what I said or not, but that seems to be right, at least. I agree with you. But yeah, Sally Rooney's first book, or my first read, was very, very enjoyable and a light read and engaging. Quite a simple plot, but I thought it was a great read. Then I found this one, and I have thought about reading more Sally Rooney. But in my mind, it feels like I feel like they're more complex than Normal People was. Both this one and the first one, I can't remember what it was called. But just the title of this suggests that it has a more difficult topic than Normal People. Even though they went through some stuff, I guess. A lot of stuff, so. But I think I could enjoy this one as well, of course. Otherwise, I hope I wouldn't have dragged it into my home. Murder Ballads. Only Miss Nick Cave I've heard. I liked it, but that was a long time ago. I've seen Nick Cave several times, and I saw him last year, and that was pretty amazing. I've seen him, the other times I've seen him perform, it's been more like he was... It is very much a show where it's a theater almost. The stage is filled with musicians and instruments, and Nick Cave himself is kinda intense. I think you have to be in the mood for someone screaming preach, preach into the audience. But if you're in that mood, it works very, very well. Of course he knows what he's doing he's been doing this a long time. I actually looked up his age after the concert, and he was much younger than I thought. He just looks a bit older. Do you have a preference for chunky long books or shorter reads, or does it just depend? I think it really depends, and I think about this all the time. Actually, earlier today I recorded a video about my reads for January, because time is short after I make this video. And the longer books often stay with me for a longer period of time. I often tend to want to read the longer books, even though it's pretty much mixed if I like the longer books or the shorter ones. It's not easy to say. But I think the longer books stay with you in a different way. It's just a matter of how much time and effort you've put into them. One extreme example is when I read all of Knausgård's My Struggle books last year. It felt like I spent 1/4 of a year just with Knausgård, and it was sort of like a relationship. The same thing with Kristin Lavransdatter, that was about 1200 pages, I guess. Also felt like I had a relationship towards that book, or not just reading it. But I do find chunky books fascinating, and that I did before I started reading as well. It was something that drew me to them, but I think that has more to do with the feeling you get of like finishing a big book and feeling good about yourself. But it's those thoughts I'm now looking at as silly, because you truly want to read a book for the enjoyment, and only that. That's at least my goal, but I'm still not there. I still think about chunky books as something one ought to be doing, I guess. Do you ever put down a book, stop reading it because you didn't like it? That's also something I'm working with. I have only DNF'd one book, and that was Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children last year. That was just so complex that I couldn't fathom what the point was in that novel. So I had to put it down. And also in January I read a book I should have DNF'd because I was bored, but I didn't, and still I don't regret it because it was a shorter book. I think that was the case with Midnight's Children as well. It was so big that I sort of had to stop because I didn't understand the thing, but still I think I read, and now I can't remember exactly, but I read like 50 or 100 pages before I stopped, and I told people around me that I can't manage to do this. I can't keep on going because I don't understand the thing, so I just put it down. And that I don't regret, but at some point I have to read Salman Rushdie as well. He's one of the big ones, I guess, so I don't have to, but I feel I have to. I enjoyed Nick Cave, the Angel. Yep. That was, I think that's higher rated than the one I got also at Goodreads. I figured that one out afterwards, and I understood that the person that left it at this kiosk did that for a reason, because the book wasn't great, I guess. But it's the most populous country in the world. I think you will be able to make the connection now. So it's a part of India, I guess, or geography isn't my strongest side, I have to admit. But I read somewhere that, or there was something about China and India like surpassing each other in numbers of people, and I've thought until now, I guess, that China was the biggest one. So, oh yeah, you guys created China just recently, didn't you? Okay. Crested China? So that word I don't know. Yeah. So the next one, I started wondering now. Bharat is another name for India. Thank you, Andrew, saving me. So now I learned something new from this live stream. People often ask me what I get out of YouTube in general, and sometimes it's difficult to say, but at least now I will be more equipped for quizzing later on, so that's a great plus. And also the books. I sort of feel like I've become the person people look to when it comes to new literature, and that's also a thing I hadn't thought I would be doing like some years ago. So, and the next one is a book I have no clue what it's about, but I brought it with me because it had a funny translation. So in English, I guess the title of this one, let me see here, that way, is, I can't really get a hold of this. It's Hunting and Gathering by Anna Gavalda. I don't know if I'm butchering that last name either, but in Norwegian it's Together One Is Less Alone, and when I looked it up on Goodreads, many places that was also the title, so I know a little German, and it was the same in German and in Danish and in Swedish, but like in English it's Hunting and Gathering. This book I actually thought I would get rid of, but the reason I didn't get rid of it is because that it's sold so many copies, that's the first thing. Also, I know my mother really likes this one and I've heard her talking about it, and sometimes I feel like I could enjoy books that everyone likes. That's often the case with like TikTok books or Instagram books I've read that has a very high rating. I often like them very much. This one is like 600, 700 pages, so that it has that against it, because it's difficult to know if that will be a selling point. But have any of you read it? I feel like it's sold over 2 million in Europe. That's quite a number. But Hunting and Gathering, I got very confused while trying to find this one on Goodreads. I find Goodreads to be a very bad place to look up books or editions. Often, if I'm often trying to find editions of Nordic books, trying to find out if they're translated or not. But when I go on Goodreads, I sort of have to go on other editions and then just find something similar to Norwegian. And if it's a classic book, it might have 1,000 editions or something like that. It's pretty hopeless. So yeah, I wish that feature was better. Also, when trying to look up audiobooks editions, that would be a lot easier if it had like an audiobook tag. It hasn't had that so far, so yeah. I wish they'd like fix it. I find that many readers have Storygraph as their favorite one, at least those that are most eager on the internet. They feel like Storygraph is the place where they answer your requests and fix things you want to get fixed. And, well, what more can you ask for? Still not used to the clinical look of Storygraph. The Glasgow singer Chris Cornell has published autobiography, fiction and poetry. He lives in Chicago now and was a member of the ministry. His solo work is fantastic. Wow, nice recommendation. I thought at first that you had written wrong, that it was talk about Chris Cornell, the other famous musician. To be honest, I use my own Excel spreadsheet. It's pretty good for stats, etc. Oh yes, I've thought about doing that myself. We have a Norwegian person on Instagram that hands out her Excel sheets every year, because she has made like a sheet for her own reading, I guess. I've been thinking about that for myself, but this year I didn't do anything about it. One thing is that I'm not that good in Excel, but the second thing is that I now have enough doing with both Storygraph and Goodreads, and I like the social aspects of it. I like seeing what my friends are reading at the time, and especially what my friends have rated books at. So sometimes I read a book and then go to Goodreads before and look for my friends' stats on that book, and sometimes I ask them why. Why are you like this? Couldn't we just agree on this? So the Excel thing is pretty good. You can send me if you go to my channel. You can send me via my email address if that's okay. I would love to see the Excel sheet. I would probably start using it myself as well. Yeah, I think we'll go over to the next one. The next one is one of those books that I went on Goodreads today to see if it had an English translation. It hasn't yet, and that's I will directly translate it. It's Monica Fagerholm. She's a Swedish author. Who Killed Bambi? And this is one of those winners for the Nordic Council Literature Prize, and I asked the publisher if they would send me a copy, and they did, so that's great. I thought I'd read the 10 most recent Nordic Prize. It's a very difficult name. It's Nordic Council Literature Prize winners, so I thought I would read the 10 last ones and then like make a tier list, or at least rate the 10 last ones. And if I did that, I could still continue to read one of the winner one at a time after that. So that I thought would be fun. I've also read some of the earlier, and I've chosen an award because 2 years ago I read the Booker Prize books, and I thought that was kind of a fun way to discover new countries and new books and new authors. And so I thought this year, or last year, I thought I'd do it with the Nordics, which was also fun, but now I thought I'd just read the winners because those are supposed to be the best. I find some comfort in that. So that's one. And the second one in that category is this one. It's Between Trees by Girder Eliasson. And the thing about this book is that it's a collection of short stories, so it's 47 short stories. It will be difficult to talk about this, to set it up against the other ones. This won the Nordic Council Literature Prize in 2011, because I haven't really read short stories yet, and I don't know what to expect. Do you guys have any, have you read short stories before? Is that a fun thing? It's difficult for me to imagine reading so many stories and think of them as one big piece. Is that just something for I'm thinking? I don't know, it's unusual to me at least. So that was also sent to me, so looking forward to reading that, especially just because it's so unknown. Welcome, Elvin. I think Goodreads shows you the tags on other editions regarding format, but it would be great having a language tag. Yes, I've tried that format tag earlier on audiobooks, but it hasn't worked. So that's why I'm saying that it is not a thing. I guess it has issues at least. I'm struggling to find it. Welcome, Eddie. I don't like short story collections personally, so I avoid them, but many people like them because you can read one and then put it book down for a while and some back to it whenever. That's true, and I find it easier to read short story collections where you set, your goal is to only read a short story and not a collection of them. So in this case, it's a whole book with short stories, and reading that book as a whole would be weird. But 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I bought a huge book, probably around 1500 pages, with classic short stories, where it's a lot of short stories from Russia, Tolstoy, for example. And that one I enjoyed reading then, but after a while I didn't remember what short stories I had read, and then I gave up. At some point I thought I would get through the whole thing, but then I just, maybe I should try again now, or maybe not. I'm not sure. I know how you feel about classic literature, Eddie, so maybe not. The Interpreter of Maladies is my favorite short story collection, but I haven't read a great deal. I have not heard about that one. I like novel length better myself, but it's pretty neat to get all these short stories in a row. At least if they're written well. Yeah, that's the important thing. I want to read Bob Dylan's last book, kind of short stories, I guess. And then apparently Georges Louis Borges, so bad with names, is a master of short stories. Also a new name to me. Yeah, yes, I at least know what you think about classic literature. So the next one, I have to admit that one thing about having a goal of buying fewer books this year is that I'll buy books that I really want to read for some reason. As you'll discover, the reason is not always the perfect reason, I guess. But this next one I ordered and it came to me 2 days ago, and that is this one. Ugh, I'm so bad at finding the camera when I'm looking at myself. Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. And this is a novel, I don't know what score it has on Goodreads, but it's absolute fantastic score. It's supposed to be really, really great, and a lot of people have also seen the televised edition of this novel, and still, I don't know what it's about. And the reason why I haven't bought it before is because of the horrendous cover. I just think it's not pleasant to look at, but a lot of people just love this book for all it's worth. So this one I bought, and is it a children's novel or a YA novel? I'm not sure, but a fancy-like novel. I thought every one of you had read this one, but that's my prejudice. I often feel when I buy books, I think that everyone that watches my videos have read all the books I'm talking about. Obviously, that's not the case, but it's still a thing I think about every day. Morten Støksnes have a collection called 51 Deadlines with published articles. I have read half and I think I need to find it again. Interesting. Published articles. I hosted an exchange student from Brazil, and he gave me a Jorge Luis Borges GLB book, translated into English as a thank you gift. It was weird and right up my alley. Studio Ghibli makes so many good animated movies, including Howl's Moving Castle. Well, yes, I know that many people love those animated movies. I haven't still found the joy in them. I've only watched 2 of them, I think. It just didn't hit me right. But now I'm going to read this one, and then I will go over to watching the movie. If it's a movie or a series, I don't know. But a friend of me reached out to me yesterday when she found out that I bought this book, and she said that she liked the book better. So, who knows? I will need to read more books that I've watched the movie to, or vice versa, like doing both, I guess, and compare. I guess that will be fun, and I've struggled to do so far, but at some point I will... What's the word? I will do something about it, I guess. And then we have a book that I know what's about, and that's Ben Aronovich, Whispers Underground. So this is the 3rd book in the Rivers of London series, which I've found to be quite enjoyable. It's about this police officer called Peter Grant. He goes around hunting ghosts or rivers, a lot of different creatures, I guess. It has been a lot of ghost rivers so far. If it's ghost rivers or just ghosts and rivers, and then I mix it up a bit, I'm not sure, but at least both of them. And I've always wanted to be a fan of a series, and this is exactly that. So I hope to be reading the whole series. I think it's about 9 books. I've talked about this before, but it's 9 books, but then it's the books like 0.3, 0.5, 1.4, 1.7, and I have to be real fanboy to enjoy that aspect of reading fancy novels. I don't know what you think about the matter, but it just feels so stupid. Can't you just be satisfied with the books you've written? You can't write book 1, 2, 3 and then go back and call it like book number 0.8 because you was dissatisfied or you had this brilliant idea of something you missed. I just want to scream at them and tell that's life. You can't really just... You can, obviously, and the book sells. So, what can you do? I just don't like it. I want to feel that if I read book number 1, 2, 3, I want to be finished with book number 1, 2, 3. I don't want to go back and then have to buy 0.8 again. It just feels stupid. But those books are funny, and the male character is kind of dumb in many ways. He's not the brightest, and I sort of like clumsy, dumb men in books, especially fancy. That's also why I like some of the Neil Gaiman books, and I found afterwards that the dumber the male characters are, the funner the books gets. the more fun, because I don't know. Maybe it's just me thinking that, well, it's not me at least. It's you that makes a fool of yourself this time. Yeah, thank you, Eddie. It's nice to get support on that subject. It just feels so weird. Why would you do such a thing? Then we have. So I read all the 6 My Struggle books from Knausgård. That felt weird. But now I bought my first Knausgård recommendation, and that's Ernst Junge, Storm of Steel. This is a novel about the First World War, and it's supposed to be a very dark version of the First World War, as you can imagine. I can't imagine anyone writing a cheerful novel about that war. But at least this is, in Knausgård's words, the only and best novel from that era. So I know that I like Knausgård's writing, even though he writes. So even when he writes about himself and what he ate for dinner and which teacher he liked looking at when he was little. So I don't know, but this will be my first. Knausgård recommended me this read. I'm not going to make a series about books I've read because Knausgård recommended them to me. That would be too much, way too much. But it's still fun to see what kind of books did Knausgård want me to read, or just recommend to anyone. The next one, I guess, is this one. It's Lord of the Flies by William Golding. And I read a book 2 days ago, I guess, which referenced this. So Lord of the Flies is one of the, I guess it's a modern classic. And I've always wanted to read it because it seems so, what's the word? Brutal, I guess. I don't know what the plot is exactly. I just know a few things about it. But yeah, a shorter modern classic. I tend to read some of them as well. I often, when I set out to read for a month, I start reading one type of book and then I jump to another just because I read that other specific book. I never tend to read the same type of book 2 or 3 books in a row. So if I read a fantasy novel, I would probably read a very, very Nordic novel about divorce or something like that, and then go back to the fantasy afterwards. But usually I tend to jump between 3 or 4 different genres of books. It's not even genres, it's more like the feeling I think I will get out of them. So if I read a fantasy novel, I guess I will be transported into something very different than I'm in at the moment. Then we have the Nordic realism, as I tried to explain now. Then we have the crime fiction, where I've mostly read Lars Kepler. And maybe the last one is the non-fiction that I can go and read sometimes. Like I talked about earlier, that people, like I'm a mood reader, I go for whatever I want, but are there any of you that just know what to read at all times and have like one genre that you really, really love and spend like 90% of your time reading? Or do you still switch between different types of genres and books? Please comment if you have any thoughts on that. The next one is one fan favorite, I would say. I'm going over to calling, so the people that watch my videos and comment a lot, I will just start calling you fans, because fan favorites seems like it's an easy thing to say. It just rolls off your tongue. Is that expression? So Eddie, this one is for you, and it's Scythe. Okay, this by Neil Schusterman. And if I remember correctly, which I probably won't, it's about young people that is going to have to kill people to keep themselves alive. It's a YA, and it has been on my mind for a long, long time, because it just seems a bit cruel but fun. Yes, I thought of you when I ordered this, Eddie. because yeah, you have recommended it a lot of times. My 60-year-old male coworker reading buddy also loved it, and we tore through the trilogy. I guess I will too. I have a lot of friends that have considered reading this or read it, so I think this will be fun. Also, I guess I will spend little time going through them. And that's also a positive for me. I guess reading 100 books this year will be like a real challenge, and sometimes I think it will become a chore. I'm hoping not, but it will surely commit me to be quite continuous in my reading work, I guess. So that's why I like how many people are not doing TBRs anymore. Why do we feel obliged to commit to read something when you don't know if you want to read it later that month or not? Yeah, I very much agree. I like mood reading. It makes way more sense. Plus, then I don't get into reading slump. Yeah, I very much agree. I did TBRs maybe one time. No, I've done it 2 times, but one time in 2021 I made a TBR for that month, and I instantly regretted it, and I instantly went on reading other books because it felt stupid. It felt like, why should I read books when I'm not in the mood? So that makes perfect sense. But still, there are a lot of TBRs out there. I did make a lot of videos about 10 books I want to read at some point, but that was more to familiarize myself with a type of book and try to spread my reading around a bit to find new genres and ideas. So I do not regret that. Also, last year I had an ambition. Sometimes my head starts wondering if N and A I've pretty much nailed down, I think, but sometimes it's difficult. Nevertheless, I have last year I had a thing where I wanted to read 5 big books, but that's more to make myself read bigger books. Often I don't want to spend the time because of my reading goals. So I sort of had to put them up as a TBR in order to do it. But that was over the course of a year, so I knew that at some point I would be in the mood for them. I've never thought about moods. I think I read books after what topic and author I'm interested in. That sounds like a very, very good strategy, and the one I should be using more. I usually figure out which books to read based on what general emotion I want to get out of it. If I want to wonder, I go for sci-fi. If I want to hear some effed up stuff, horror or so on. Yeah. But often I find it's difficult to predict the mood from a book, or it is for me at least. I can feel so even though if I choose a fantasy novel, I can feel a lot of stuff that I didn't predict. But I think that's also one of the things you learn the more you read, that you can it's more easy to predict what feelings you're going to expect, what feelings you're going to get out of it, I was going to say. There are writers who more or less specialize in the short story. I've read some great short stories, a Guy de Maupassant, and Anton Chekhov, Flannery O'Connor, and Isaac. There was a lot of difficult names there. But Flannery O'Connor I've considered reading a bunch of times. I still haven't bought any of her books, but there's one book in particular I've been thinking about reading a lot of times, which I've forgotten about. But it's likely it's the most famous one, I guess. That's usually the case. I go off mood too. Life is too short to read books you aren't really in the mood for. So it seems like all of you are mood readers, but somehow it feels like the people I watch around me have a lot of like very, very small TBRs because they always know what they're in the mood for. I guess there's one type of reader I know that just reads, I don't know if it's correct to call it chick lit. in Norwegian we have other expressions for it, but romance novels. And if you're only into romance novels, and I follow a couple of romance novels readers on Goodreads that go through like 200 of those a year, but those are kind of a special group, I guess, reading-wise. Nabokov and William Faulkner and Isaac Denison also wrote great stories. I have one of those here. That's also newly on my list. 7 Gothic Tales. So it's fun that you should mention her. I have not yet read anything from Karen Blixen, but this is one of those that I think I will end up reading in the course of the year. So that's kind of fun. Nabokov also, of course, I think we talked about this in our last live stream, that I wanted to read Lolita. Mood reader here as well. I tend to fail any reading challenge. Yeah. I do not think I will fail my reading challenge, but should I have failed my reading challenge this year, I'll see in the course of the year if that's the case. I might end up thinking that I should have failed my reading challenge for the year. Lumpis asks, what's a TBR? Yes, TBR is one of those expressions that are really, really booktubey, and it stands for to be read. So if you have a bunch of books you want to read, that's your TBR. So Hemingway's stories are good, and Kafka's short fiction bores are wonderfully deep despite their brevity. If you're only into romance novels, go away. Yeah, it's hard to relate to the romance novel gang. I have nothing against, like, I'm probably more fond of romance in novels than the average, I guess, or maybe not. Maybe it's just something I think about myself that's wrong, that also happens, but I don't mind it. But the people that only read like the romance novels, in Norwegian it's called kiosklitteratur. It's the literature you find in kiosks. It's kind of condescending maybe, but at least those romance novels I don't think I would have enjoyed. Even it is in fact a lot of those novels at this cabin, so maybe I'll just go and check them out afterwards and I can start reviewing romance for a while. And when I say for a while, I mean one book. MBR I haven't heard about actually. Might be read. Yeah, that's a good expression. And probably a more accurate description on what's going on, because let's be honest, it's not necessarily read all the books on the TBR, I guess. The next novel I thought I'd speak a little bit about, and I mean little bit about. It's Iron Wolf by Siri Pettersen. She's maybe our most famous Norwegian fantasy author. She has this other series called Ravneringene, with Odin's Child as the first one. I think this came out last year, and this is actually a reading copy that I found at the thrift store, which I find to be illegal, I guess. I do not think that the Salvation Army is supposed to sell these books, but like they're profiting on illegal behavior. I find that to be enjoyable as well. Also, it was a cheap book for me, so that's a good thing. I've been thinking about reading Siri Pettersen for a while. It's like reading Norwegian fantasy is something I've put off for a while. Maybe just because there aren't that many books in the fantasy genre yet, but they're coming now. And this one I'm looking forward to reading, and I'm now considering if this should be the first one or the Ravneringene series should be the first one. Because this has gotten a lot of praise also outside of Norwegian borders, so it seems like she has hit the nail on this one. So yeah, have any of you read Siri Pettersen? any of you guys not from Norway, because she seems to be more and more popular, increasingly so. I have the series in English in my Amazon cart, I think because of your channel. Well, that means that I should probably read C.A. Pettersen before you, so I don't... No, I don't know. It just... I want to read her as well. So, the next one is also what I would call a fan favorite, and that's Thomas Mann and Buddenbrooks. Yeah. It's Thomas Mann is one of those names that came up quite early when I started looking for books on YouTube, and I bought the Magic Mountain thinking that the Magic Mountain was like his big piece, also a big book, and in some ways it seems like the Magic Mountain is this like the European big novel, whilst Buddenbrooks is the book that he got like awarded for, because he won the Nobel Prize for Literature with this one as the main reason, while I thought that the Magic Mountain was his big book, but that seems to be for the thinkers. Of course, I've read Knausgård. I think I will reference Knausgård for the rest of my life. I'm sorry, but he's just been a too big part of my life now. But at least he talks about Thomas Mann a whole lot. But Knausgård nearly almost only talks about Death in Venice and the Magic Mountain, and not this one. While when I went on the internet to research this, it seemed that all people had read Buddenbrooks. My biggest, the sad thing about this is that this book seemed to be quite shorter in Norwegian than in English, and I thought this would be an abbreviated version or abridged version. I almost always mix those two up. At least this is a way shorter novel, but then I just found that the font is really, really small, and that was what I feared. I couldn't find it in stores, so I couldn't verify it. I ordered it online and then found out. Which is the worst thing ever. Reading a chunky novel with a small font is not something I find enjoyable. Amazon says Odin's Child is first. Is that accurate? Yes, Odin's Child is the first one in the Ravnringen series, and then this one I got here is the first one in the new series she has, and that is called Vardari. So, yeah. Odin's Child is the first one in a trilogy, and then there's this one that's supposed to become a trilogy after a while, it seems. I really love the cover art. It could have been a part of the same series because they look kind of similar, but it's another series. But if you're going to read Odin's Child first, Eddie, I have to do the same, I guess. I think that sounds reasonable. So, I thought I'd speak a little bit about YouTube, because recently I've started posting shorts on my YouTube channel, and what's the name? It's recycling, because I now chop up my the videos I make at the end of each month, so there's wrap-up videos, and I chop them up to individual videos, short videos about the books I've talked about. So every one of those you will have seen if you've seen my wrap-ups, but I thought it would be an easier way to reach other people. For the first thing is that you have the title of the book that you've read in the video. So many people tend to, or I can recognize myself as a person that watches BookTube, that if I Google a name of a book and a heap of suggestions comes up, I will push the one that has the name of the book in the title. So that's the main reason. Also, I kind of like having short videos or chopping up short videos, because it's a lot easier. It has nothing to say that where you put the cut. You can make them however you like, and no one will care. And the crappier the cutting is, the better it is, because it seems more intense. So that's kind of fun. I just wanted to ask you if any one of you have watched my shorts and my videos, because I imagine that all my short videos will be watched by new people, and my long form videos will be watched by other ones. I like the long form best. I will never start making shorts to make shorts, I guess, because I find that less compelling. But it felt like when I did it, I didn't want to bother anyone. So if I started doing it, I wouldn't like annoy people with twice the amount of videos about the same things. It just seemed crazy and dumb. So do you have any comments to that? Is there any thoughts on it? Because I don't know. I just don't know if people watch like both things. Yeah, check out the Petterson, Richie. I don't know, but I think it's kind of YA. I don't know if it's like the mix of ordinary fancy and YA fancy, but I don't think it's like the... When I think about it, it's YA, I would say. I read some of the action, like some of the plot in them seemed very YA. So, yeah. So the shorts is fun to make, and I don't spend any more time making the... Andrew says, sorry, missed the last point. Would you mind repeating the question? I was just wondering if you watch both short content and long form on my channel specifically, because as I said, I'm posting like short content as chopped up versions as like from my normal wrap-up videos. So I just cut my wrap-ups into each books, post them as shorts, and then they're there for a bit of time. I post them like every now and then in the course of the month to get like regular postings, hoping that YouTube will love me for some reason. And it has been effective so far. So one of the videos I posted as a short has gotten a very many views in very short period of time, and they sort of like just spike in 1 hour and then they're dead. So it's kind of entertaining for us that sit and watch the statistics. And Peder Hegdal says, when will you post a video of the Queen Agnes Ravatn? Yes, I know that you like her very much. Agnes Ravatn is a very, very popular writer in Norway. She's kind of one of those tough writers. She doesn't put anything between her message, so it's pretty straightforward. I haven't yet read anything from her, but I know she's now relevant with a new book that came out like in the fall last year, I guess, like all Norwegian books. But at some point, Peder, I will read something from Agnes Ravatn. Lumpis, I like the shorts, but never stop doing longer. Shorts aren't compulsive for me in terms of books, but I know YouTube is really pushing them. Yeah, I feel like they're pushing them as well. For me, it's more that I can make a lot of videos with spending less time, I guess. And like before, I made a lot of long videos. I haven't got the time for making all of those videos that I would have liked to make. But chopping up the shorts, if I get more people to watch my videos from them, that would be fun. Also fun to make just different types of videos, I guess. I can practice my video chopping skills. It's nice that you're trying to cater to your audience, but honestly, people like a variety of posts that you want. So post what you want. Yeah. I think my question was, and it was a bad question. The question was more, do you feel like I'm pushing my videos up in your face each time you open YouTube? But I'll probably not, it seems. Haven't seen any shorts come up in my feed. Yep, then it works as planned, Richie. Do you have any thoughts on Roald Dahl and his fall from grace? Yes, it's kind of fun because as Roald Dahl is in Norway seen as half Norwegian at least, maybe even more, but he has a Norwegian name also. But I never seem to mix the artist and the art, I guess, even though he seems like a jerk now after what I've gathered. I never mind that. Sort of, At least not when they're dead. I can feel a little bit of shame if I like listen to a music artist that behaves like an asshole, or read a book from someone that's a completely, yeah, something bad. But yeah, I don't mind that too much as long as I enjoy their works. But I don't know if it's like that public that he isn't the greatest person ever. I don't. When I talk to, when I discovered this, I talked to a lot of people about it, and they were like, "I've never heard anything about that." So I don't think that many people knows, to be honest. I don't find having both shorts and videos bothersome. I watch both depending on how much time I have. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I agree. I was actually thinking of reading some Peter Hanke, and he is most certainly not a top person. Yeah, and I find when Peter Hanke won the Nobel Prize for Literature, I was also more intrigued of what kind of person that was. So I have no problem with reading his books. And I also have one other idiot on my list, if I can use those words. I guess I don't know him personally, but I know that Lumpis in the chat here is a huge fan. And that is this guy, Michel Houellebecq, with Serotonin. I saw a picture on Twitter, I think, yesterday with Michel Houellebecq. He's a man in his 60s, 70s, something along those lines. I don't like to characterize people, but he just looks... It's a mix between a person that has lived his life to the fullest and a person that doesn't regret anything. But I saw him together with, like, I think there were Dutch women in their 20s, might have been prostitutes. I think I read that somewhere. But at least he's the one of a kind, it seems. And for that reason, I wanted to read him. Also because Lumpis is a fan, and yeah, when friends recommend me books, I really want to try to read them, especially if they have a good reason. I have no clue what this book is about. I've ordered it on a Norwegian site, and where you can sort books after what is most popular, and this author is among the most popular on that site, at least. If that's rigged, I don't know. But yeah, have you guys read anything from Michel Houellebecq? And how do you pronounce that last name? I say Houellebecq as quickly as I can, afraid of putting it in the wrong way. So, but at least he's one of those people I don't think I could have read if I should only view the person making the art. So let's see here. I think it's pronounced as if starting with A like W like Welbeck. Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, it's like saying Welbeck as well? Like Welbeck, Welbeck. I've heard that once before and I almost didn't believe it, but now I've heard it 2 times, so it might just be correct. And probably you know a lot more about this than I do, so that's one thing. Yeah, but I have a list of people that, and I think we can be honest, and if you read a classic novel from any person, or especially classic literature from men, they would have been doing something you wouldn't be doing yourself, I guess. Then we have Jan Martel with The History of, and I'm not sure, but it's The History of Pi. Yeah, I guess so. So the major movie. I haven't watched the movie because I wanted to read the book. It seems like a very, very adventurous novel, and I do like stories more than I like writing and character development. So with a big tiger, small boy, small boat, I guess, I think this will be entertaining. And it's one of those novels that's just so popular that it must be a reason for its huge popularity. So many people can't be wrong. Well, they can, but often they're not, I feel, at least. So, do you have any popular books that were totally awful that you like to spread some negativity around? Start a debate, just comment. Because the next novel is also a book that has been debated, and that's the sequel to A Bookkeeper in Kabul. So not Sigge, but Åsne Seierstad wrote about this bookshop owner in Kabul, and he wrote about his family, and she traveled around with him all over the place. And after she published the book, he sort of didn't like that at all, so he decided to write his own book. The fun thing is, of course, that Åsne Seierstad's book describing him and his family has gotten a lot of critique, but mostly praise in Norway, whilst this one is, in lack of a better word, slaughtered on Goodreads. I just think that's because of the message, not the writing itself. I think that's fair to say. It's like, I don't know if the things that says in Åsne Seierstad's book are true. It wouldn't be great to be him, I guess. Maybe where he lives, but not if he left the borders of his country. I don't know. He just didn't seem like a perfect person. Have you read The Wolf Hall? No. I thought it was unenjoyable, but everyone else loved it. Who's written that book? It's not one I've heard about. Wolf Hall doesn't ring any bells. Maybe people are trying to protect me against that novel. Oh, Hilary Mantel. Okay. I don't know many of her novels. Haven't yet read anything from her so far. Just one of those names without any meaning yet. Recently I got one book in the mail from a publisher because they wanted to spread the words around their book, and this is Nattens Magi, or The Magic of the Night, by Maria von Rumlow. And I don't know if... I have to say, the title is Is tacky the word? Maybe. That feels weird, but I've heard a lot of good things about the novel, and this is one of those authors that writes Norwegian fantasy. This is only translated, not translated, it's only in Norwegian so far, but I thought I'd read this one after I read Siri Pettersen to see what's going on in the Norwegian fantasy department. So it's just an example of Siri Pettersen started the genre in Norway. It seems, anyone could correct me if I'm wrong, but she is the front figure, and she has also started this award that recently started, the Norwegian Fantasy Award, something along those lines, to get more attention around the genre. And that's very cool. Also feels like the fantasy genre in general has exploded the last 10 to 20 years, I guess, with like first Lord of the Rings, the movies, and then the other big series from HBO. It just seems like a lot of things are moving in the direction of fantasy blowing up a bit. And let's see here. Have to organize my desk or my table. One book I've seen a lot, like over the years, I've seen this book all over the place, and I've thought of it as something along the lines of a romance novel. And sometimes you just, in your mind, you think things that are completely wrong. Often I do, at least. And without actually reading it, I would have never guessed like what direction that novel would take. And I haven't read it so far, but I started listening to it and then I had to stop because my expectations just clashed with what it actually said. And that's this one, My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. And the reason why I do not longer think about this one as a romance novel is because I saw it over at Sean's channel, Traveled Through Stories. He talks about it, and when Sean talks about books, I think that the books aren't just easily read simple books, to put it that way. Sean is on another level. So when I saw him talking about this, I thought I would give it a chance. In Norway, this is famous for its translation because it's translated into Norwegian nynorsk, the small Norwegian language which I write, and because of that I found that I would try to read it soon. So I started out and it seemed more like there are murders, there are mafiosos, not that many love stories yet. But this is it's not a trilogy, it's 4 books. I can't remember what that's called. 4 books that's supposed to be great. So yeah, I felt kind of good not buying the 4 books. I found this at the flea market as well, and all of the 4 books were there in like bound editions, and I thought, well, I was this close at just buying all 4 of them, but I didn't. So let's see. Then over to a novel I do not know anything about. I don't know if the chat died on my screen or if it died in general. If it just died on the screen, it's okay, but yeah, I can't see the chat anymore at least. Maybe it has disappeared. Yeah. Hope someone's out there. So the next book I do not know anything about, but it's one of those books that keeps on appearing, and it's this one. Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. Is it Jonathan Franzen? I do not know which country he belongs to. But at least this is one of those books that were all over the place, and it didn't seem like people loved this one. It just seemed like people wanted to read it, and then very mixed signals in my feed at least. But it seemed to be a very, very untouched edition, and for only $1 equivalent, I thought this would be a steal. So I picked it up and took it with me. Franzen thinks he's American. Well, then okay, it's just a bit still on the chat, so it reappeared to me. That's nice to know. I'm starting on my 2nd glass of water. Like, speaking for 1 hour straight is kind of, who would have thought that you would get thirsty? We have 2 votes for American author, and then I think that settles it. I have a lot of books that I don't know what it's about, but I often know what to expect, or more often know what to expect. And the second one is the 20th one is a book that's impossible. There you go. It's Erlend Nødtvedt and The Murder of Henrik Ibsen. So this is like a comedy novel, and I think this is kind of pure comedy novel. In many of the cases you read books that aren't that funny, but they have funny elements, but I think this is supposed to be funny, and that I have missed a whole lot. I like things that are fun. Yeah, I also think this is a cool cover. It was difficult to... Yeah, it's kind of spacey. It has a lot going on. A lot of covers have a lot going on them. Yeah, that's actually one thing I enjoy. When you read a book, and after you've read it, you can look at the cover and finally understand what the person that have made it, the graphic artist, or what's it called, the illustrator, has been thinking when making it. Because before you read it, you might not know. So often if there's a lot of details and you have details that you actually understand why someone has put there, it makes a lot of sense. Okay, now I'm just rambling, so I think we're nearing the end, because I can feel it in my soul, and my soul again. So I also only have 1 book left that I thought I'd mention, and just so it's said again, I think I wrote it in the description that these books I've bought I bought them last year, so it's not like they end up on my books bought in 2023. I think only 4 of them are bought this year, so that's good. Also, I think I've read 8 books by now, so I'm right on track, let's just put it that way. And the next one is by an author that I feel like I'm supposed to love a whole lot, and that's Alan Lu at the top there. He is a very funny person, very down to earth. He's kind of Norwegian in that way. He keeps to himself, he talks in a low voice, he writes satirical about important topics, and he's not that much in the public unless he has a strong opinion about something newsworthy. So I don't know what that says about him, but I like that kind of people. Nevertheless, this book is called The Animals in Africa, and I've only read one of his books before, and it was kind of a weird experience. The people were like, they weren't like us others, if that's an expression in English as well. If we say that someone's weird in Norwegian, it's like, he's not like everyone else. But in Norwegian it sounds more brutal, maybe. So this is also one of those funny books, I guess. Or absurd ones. 5 people, 5 animals, and a cunning plan to save the world from the people's foolishness. So yeah, that's it. Let me see if I made some notes, if there were anything else I was going to talk about. I don't think so. So I think we'll just wrap it up from this cabin live stream, unless you don't have something very pressing to say. So thank you all for watching this one, and I'll see you in the regular YouTube world and with my next live stream. I actually very much enjoy these live streams, so I'm very happy that you joined in. So thank you, and I'll see you later. Bye!